All right, let's talk about color. I'm excited to move on. This is the part where we move away from drawing and start to really dig into painting. And when we do that, we still use our drawing skills because we have to draw things out before we paint them, typically. But I like to pause and just talk about color theory before we do that, because you probably noticed in your bag of supplies that I gave you the primary colors and white and black, and that was for a reason. So we'll talk about that, and then I'll wrap up this video with your next project this week. So let's take a look at the very basics. Like I said, primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. You probably learned that in kindergarten, but it's a good reminder. This is the foundation of all of color theory. And we're going to talk about color theory through the lens of visual arts. But you could also make this conversation very scientific and talk about light and refraction and reflection and the absence of light in your eyes and how all of that affects how you see color. But for right now, we're going to talk about it through the lens of art. I will tell you, in college, I had a whole semester class that just discussed color and design and how people use color when they're designing and mixing paint. And there's just enough there, enough content when you talk about color to fill a college class, is my point. Okay, so red, yellow, and blue. If you look at your inkjet printer at home, you'll notice that the ink cartridges use the primary colors and black. CMYK is what they call it. Cyan is another word for blue. M is for magenta, which is a version of red. Yellow, CMY, yellow, and K is for black. So that is something that printers use, because using just the primaries in black, you can make so many different combinations of those colors that you can print anything, really. All right, so one level deeper is where we talk about secondary colors. So if you took two primary colors, like for example, yellow and blue, and you mix them together, you'd get green. Yellow and red makes orange. Blue and red make purple, which we sometimes call violet. Don't forget about complementary colors, because as you make color choices in your artwork, you'll want to think about which color is its complement. So blue, for example, its complementary color is orange. And I know that because it's directly across the color wheel. So what is red's complementary color? Green. Makes me think of Christmas. This is something that you should keep in mind anytime you're thinking about color. I had a good friend last week text me. She's super smart. It's not that she's not smart enough to figure out colors. She's actually a veterinarian, so she's got a really strong science brain. But she was making a quilt, and she had a lot of colors in her fabrics picked out in this range, like blues, purples, a little bit of greens. And she's like, I just know it's missing something. What is it missing? So I sent her a note back, and she really needed something from this complementary side of the color wheel. So I said, you need a little bit of orange in there, and maybe even some orange with some yellow, because she did have a lot of purple, and yellow is the complement of purple. But when people are designing things like sports uniforms, they think about complementary colors. Designing rooms, because they have to pick out colors, they think about the color wheel. Any kind of choices in color, this might come back to you, and it's as simple as that. Another layer deeper is tertiary colors. And tertiary colors have to do with when we take a primary color and we mix it with a secondary color. So for example, if we took red and we mixed it with orange, which is a secondary color, we get red-orange. It's just the subtleties in between colors that you can achieve by mixing those colors together. So tertiary, think secondary and primary together. Okay, and you can build and build and build on this and get more small variations of color as you just mix one way or the other. Shades and tints and tones are just different versions of those colors. So if you had a color that you mixed, and you mixed in white or gray or black, you can adjust that color to a different shade, tint, or tone. Here is an example of how that works. So if I had, let's say, red, and I wanted a tint of it, I'd add white. We call that color pink, but that's a tint of red. You can tone your colors down by using gray, or you can make a shade of your color by using black. I will be honest with you and tell you I don't add black to my paint to make a shade that often, just because black is so black. It's so intense, and it's I feel like it almost deadens the color a little bit. So a lot of times I'll add brown or maybe even purple, depending on what I'm trying to achieve and what other colors are around it. But you don't always have to use black, gray, or white. Here are some examples of how you could achieve more complex colors by mixing together the colors that you have. So I gave you the primary colors, black and white, on purpose because you can come up with so many variations with just those things. You don't need every color at Hobby Lobby to achieve the colors that you need for your paintings. So you have red, yellow, blue. I gave you 2 containers of white because I think people always use a lot of white just because you use that with every color that you make. I mean, if you look at these combinations, look at all but one of them has white used. And then black if you want to darken something, or if you just want straight black, or if you need to make gray. Here's the thing. I would be conservative with your paint mixing because I only gave you so much. But that being said, if you need more, we can get you more. And here's my tip for you. Start with the lightest color when you're mixing. So these don't necessarily have the colors in the order that I would start mixing them with. But if you start light and you mix in your darker colors, you're going to get to the color you desire without mixing a huge puddle of paint. I've noticed that when students start with a darker color, they have to mix in so much of the lighter color sometimes to get to the color they're trying to get to that they end up making so much paint. And if you take a wrong turn and you end up with a different color than you wanted, it just is wasteful most of the time. So my tip for you is start light. If you know you're going to be using white in there, put your white in there first, then put your yellow if you're making this lime green, and then go with, you'd put a little bit of blue to get it to look like that. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're working here. I get this question all the time, so I thought I'd just address it right now. How do I make brown? You can totally make brown. You're going to need all of the colors, and you're going to need twice as much yellow as you have to use red and blue. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with kind of an army green color. So try it. If you need to make a brown, you can get there. And then as you can see, they've used either black, red, yellow, blue, or a little more blue to get to a lighter shade or to get to other tones of that color. So I hope this visual makes sense for you. If, for instance, you wanted to make like a Caucasian skin tone, you would have 2 parts yellow, a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and then you'd add a little more yellow and then white until you get that color tone that you were looking for. Okay? So study that if you need to, but that's kind of the gist of brown. All right, here's a few reminders I have for you to make your life easier. Number 1, wash your brush with soap and water when you're done, and then swoop the bristles up and all back together so it dries that way. So when I'm washing my brush, I take a little pump of soap, I stir the paint bristles around on my hand into the soap, and then I rinse it until the water runs clear. It's really important to take good care of your brushes. And another thing that I would consider is when you're using your brush, when you're painting, I would not just let it sit out and dry, especially if you're using several different brushes. Don't ever let a brush sit and dry out while you're working because it will ruin the brush. It's pretty hard to clean them after they get dry and crusty, and sometimes you just end up having to throw them away at that point. So you might want to keep a cup of water next to you to put your brush in the water just to keep it wet so that it doesn't dry out. So always be conscious of the stage of the dryness on your bristles, and that'll save you a lot of work. As far as paint goes, I did mention it. If you run out, just let me know and we will find a way to get you more paint. I gave you as much as I could in those containers, and I could possibly drop it off on your porch, or I could leave some at school for you to pick up. But try to conserve your paint because as you can imagine, that would be a little bit of a hassle. Not a big deal, but Just conserve by mixing with your light colors first, and then see how you do. I really don't know if what I gave you is going to be enough. I actually brought some extra paint home with me, so if I need to run some out to anybody, I have it here ready to go. Paint palettes, you guys. You can use a paint palette if you have one at home. If you don't know what a paint palette is, it's just a tray. In the art room, they have like dimples on them to mix paint in. A lot of times when I'm at home, to be honest, I don't want to wash a palette when I'm done. So I'll use a paper plate or a piece of cardboard. If you used a piece of paper, I'd make sure it has like a coating on it so that it doesn't absorb your paint, because I wouldn't use paper unless it was like had some kind of shiny coating on it so that the paint repels and doesn't soak into it. But that's my tip for you as far as palettes go. It'll save you cleaning up in the end time. You can also use like recyclable containers, like maybe a yogurt container with a lid. This is going to be super helpful for you if you need to keep a color. You're going to want an airtight lid on it to keep your colors wet while they're not being used. So think about that too. Also, lids of those containers, or like foam trays from meat, if you washed them with soap and water, those make good paint palettes as well. So find something good that you like, and then also don't remix your colors every single time. Try to keep them by either covering them, even with saran wrap with a little wet paper towel in there, or put them in a container that has a lid. But let me know if that's not working for you. I can give you some suggestions. All right, let's talk about what we're doing next. So mandalas are, if you translate the word loosely, it means just a circle. So there's the Sanskrit version of a mandala. And mandalas go back to ancient cultures. So there's a lot of history. We're going to talk about a culture in a minute that works with mandalas. But I just want you to think about circles, and also think about a radial design. So basically a design that repeats itself around a radius. So in Tibet, there are Buddhist monks who have this ritual of building mandalas out of sand. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like. I can't talk to you about mandalas without showing you this. It's so satisfying to watch and mesmerizing. And it has a lot of deep spiritual meaning for them. But aside from that, it's just a beautiful art form. And I'll play the video because I think you'll get more out of that than me talking about how great it is.
Tibetan medicine and healing has always been crucial to the Buddhist path. So creating a medicine mandala is one way of healing the community, but also healing the environment. The word mandala is actually a Sanskrit term, meaning container of essence. It is that sacred circle embodying some sacred essence within. Originally, they would have used powdered stones, powdered gems, things like lapis, malachite, and so on. Today, they use crushed marble and made into sand. Now, the colours are very important because they symbolise different attributes of the deities. But in this particular one that we have here, it is all about the medicine Buddha and healing. And what they create is a heavenly palace all around him. Most of the monks have been in monasteries since the age of about 7. They would have learnt the actual art of painting a mandala in the first instance, but to actually make sand mandala takes about 5 years to train, because it's a very precise art, tapping the sand out of these copper funnels into these intricate geometric designs. The prayers that the monks perform are to do with invoking the presence of the medicine Buddha and inviting the healing power to enter the center of the mandala.
All right, I'm going to skip forward. I will post this as a Google slideshow so you can watch these in their entirety if you want to. But for the sake of this lesson, I'm going to skip forward because I think you get the gist of it, and I don't want to hold you here too long watching if you're getting antsy. Okay, so this video I chose to put in here because it shows the beginning stages, the planning stages of the mandala. So take a look at that. Look at how they're using their chalk lines to snap straight lines and build a really precise design before they start filling it in with sand, because you are going to be designing your own mandala. And so I wanted you to see that part of their process. Here we go. Wow, that sound is great, isn't it? All right, here's the question I have for you. How can I design a mandala that incorporates the color wheel? So I would like you to design a mandala, basically a design that is radial, that works with the circle, that repeats in a radial pattern around the circle. And then I want you to show me that you understand the basics of the color wheel and color theory when you paint your mandala. Okay, so let me show you how I would start. I put a bunch of just line designs together for you to look at. So I would start in your sketchbook deciding what kind of mandala you might want to put together. This one uses all curved lines, so it's pretty organic. And again, it just repeats around in a radial pattern in the circle. This one is kind of a combination of straight and curved lines. This one's more geometric and uses straight lines, but builds them in a way where I think it's pretty cool. You could make it look three-dimensional if you painted it in a certain way. And then in your sketchbook, after you've come up with a design that you like, I would look at how you're going to use your colors. So this one is pretty literally using the color wheel as its inspiration. So you can see the primary colors are there, the secondary colors are there, and then they have the tertiary colors in there as well. If you want to do that, you can, but you don't have to. But I would come up with your design just like this in your sketchbook, and I'd like to see your sketchbook work. We've stepped away from the warm-ups because I think supporting your projects in your sketchbook is a little bit more appropriate right now, and probably better for you to be doing that instead of spending your time on warm-ups. And frankly, I don't have to take attendance at the beginning of class right now, which is one of many reasons why I give you warm-ups in the beginning of class anyway. So the next thing you'll want to do is look for that tag board in the bag that I gave you. I gave you 3 sheets of that big, kind of heavier stock paper, the same one that you should have probably used for your ink drawing. So find a piece of that. Obviously, if you're doing a circle, you don't need the whole rectangle, but I would put your design on there as big as you can possibly get it. Go all the way to the edges, and I would sketch it in pencil lightly. I have to emphasize the word lightly because if you go too dark, if you look at this yellow segment here, you can see that the lines are showing through the paint because yellow is a pretty transparent color. And you're going to have to do way more layers of paint if you have that going on, because good craftsmanship means that you would not see those lines coming through your paint. So I would suggest to draw really light, and then you won't have to paint as much. But you can see that this person made sure that they had their layout figured out before they just went on, because it looks like they're using a very traditional color wheel design as far as the layout of their color goes. So they put their primary colors in those specific places on purpose, because this segment should have purple in it, right? And red and yellow. Mixed will have orange, so I'm predicting this will be orange, and then this section here will be green because it's halfway in between yellow and blue. All right, let me show you some pieces. They're student pieces, just different ways that you can execute this project. So again, very traditional color wheel. In the background of this one, they did more of a fading kind of gradient where it was fading in the background, and then over top, they painted with black, kind of like a mandala pattern, which reminds me of the ink drawings that we just did. If you're wondering, can I draw like that over my painted wheel with the Sharpie? Because I did give you a Sharpie. You can try it, but I'm going to tell you that Sharpies get gummed up when you draw on paint sometimes, and you may end up ruining your Sharpie. So you can give it a try. If your paint is super duper dry, it might work, but I personally wouldn't want to wreck a Sharpie like that. Probably try to get a paintbrush and just very carefully paint it if I could. This one does a great job using all those tints and tones and shades to differentiate different shapes. Super geometric, but I think beautiful. The way they broke up each piece of the color wheel into a pretty detailed design is gorgeous. And they just did tints and shades and tones of whatever color is in that section of the color wheel. Here's another one, pretty straightforward color wheel in the middle, and then outside their designs are tints and tones and shades of that color on the outside. I should mention craftsmanship. The craftsmanship on this one is pretty okay, but if I look closely here, this is distracting down here. So try your best to paint really carefully. The craftsmanship on this one is really pretty successful, I would have to say. This one is not painted. It's probably dry pastel or oil pastel maybe. And I'm showing you this one because I wanted to give you an example of what it might look like if you outlined your shapes in white instead of black. It gives a totally different feel to your artwork. And if you like that mood, then you could use white to outline. This one gets a little bit more complex in how it uses its color and arranges it. Still has the primary colors and the secondary colors, but they've added some different designs and kind of gone a little more outside of just a traditional color wheel design, which I think I like. It's more creative, and you don't have to just reproduce a color wheel. You could go a little bit further and make it interesting. I think this one is doing that. And this one also does that. I think this one's really beautiful. It has the traditional color wheel in the center, but on the outside they took some liberties and made some choices with other colors that they could mix with their primary colors. And I think it's really successful. I think the color choices are strong. The design is strong. It's still a mandala. It's really nice. Okay, don't forget that I want to see you mixing some colors, but then also mixing some tints and tones and shades of those colors. So assuming that you're only using red, yellow, and blue, the primary colors, white and black, I want to see all of those colors used in your design. If you're wondering, oh my gosh, I have so many cool paints at home, can I use those for this? I would say you will have a chance to use those in a different painting, but for this one, I really want you to stick to only using primary colors, black and white, because I want to see how many different colors you can mix just using those basics. I think you'll be surprised, and I think that for this challenge, that's part of the process, is mixing your own colors using the primaries. And one last reminder, no matter how hard you think this is or how difficult it seems to get your work done, it's never going to be as hard as it is to make a sand mandala like a monk. So appreciate that and know that your hard work means something to me. And also keep it in perspective. It's not as hard as some other things going on in the world, right? Okay, I wanted to show you this. So as I was looking at sand art mandalas, I got intrigued by what's called the dissolution ceremony. At the end of making these beautiful mandalas, they actually destroy them. And it's pretty methodical and it's intentional, but I don't know if it's satisfying to watch them tearing down these beautiful pieces of art or if it's cringy. You can decide, but they do it for very symbolic reasons, and they make a ceremony, like I said, out of it. And it's really making a statement about how nothing is permanent. And I wanted to show you this because I think that it's interesting to see how much work they put into these mandalas, and then at the end that they just take them down, sweep them into a pile. I'll fast forward a little bit. All right, you get the idea. I don't know if you feel like I feel, but one of the questions I have is why do they do that? They destroy it, really, but it's because the underlying message of the mandala ceremony is that nothing is permanent in life. Nothing at all. All things are in flux. And of course, this goes back to their Buddhist beliefs that say beautiful, everything is beautiful but ephemeral, moving but temporary, a plateau but not a summit. All things are called to balance and enlightenment and the fulfillment of the divine image in them. Yes, but in flux, always in flux. And that spoke to me just because that's kind of where we're at right now, right? Like we're in this time of flux. It's temporary for sure. It surely feels like a plateau for most of us, but it's not a summit. This isn't the end all for us. And we just have to stay balanced, right? So I thought that we could maybe learn a little bit from that culture and that lesson. And I don't know if I want to scream when I watch them destroy it or just appreciate the beauty and the fact that what they believe is that nothing is permanent and it's kind of a beautiful temporary piece of artwork. All right, so that is it. I'd like you to design and paint a mandala using just the primary colors, white and black, and I can't wait to see what you do. When you're finished, I would trim your paper in whatever way makes sense for your design, and I would photograph your finished mandala so that I can see it. Make sure that the photograph demonstrates your craftsmanship so that it's nicely photographed in the end. And then also I'd love to see the work that you put in your sketchbook in the beginning stages or even in the process of working on your mandala. You might want to, make some color choices and mix colors in your sketchbook along the way. But your sketchbook should show me kind of what your thought process was, because that is important. So give me a picture of your sketchbook work and a picture of your finished work when we're done. This will be due on Friday. So I am excited, and I think you'll have plenty of paint for this one. I'm not so worried about that now, but later on down the road, hopefully you'll have enough, and if you don't, we'll figure it out, right? All right, take care, you guys. Are the best, and I will talk to you soon.